It started in the early 2000s, inside a quiet engineering lab at General Motors. On paper, everything looked perfect. A brand new inline-4 engine, lightweight, modern, efficient, built to power millions of cars across North America. It was supposed to be the future, the answer to rising fuel prices, tightening emissions laws, and a new generation of compact vehicles. But what almost nobody knows is, this engine would go on to become one of the most frustrating mysteries GM engineers ever faced, because no matter how many times they tried, they couldn't fully fix it. And what happened next changed everything. You probably think you know the GM 2.2 Ecotec. Reliable, cheap, everywhere. Found in cars like the Chevrolet Cavalier and Pontiac Sunfire. But the real story? It's far more complicated. And it begins with ambition. By the late 1990s, GM was in trouble. Their older four-cylinder engines, like the aging OHV 2.2, were outdated. Competitors were pushing advanced dual overhead cam designs. Higher revving, more efficient, more refined. Honda had their VTEC. Toyota was perfecting variable valve timing. Even Ford was modernizing their four-cylinder lineup. GM was falling behind, and they knew it. So GM did something bold. They started from scratch. The Ecotec family was born, a global engine platform designed to be modular, scalable, and future-proof. Aluminum block, aluminum head, chain-driven dual overhead cams, coil-on-plug ignition. It was a massive leap forward. Investment ran into hundreds of millions of dollars. Multiple teams across continents. Years of development. This wasn't just another engine. This was supposed to be GM's comeback. The 2.2-liter version, internally known as the L61, had a bore of 86 millimeters and a stroke of 94.6 millimeters. That gave it a displacement of 2,198 cubic centimeters. Compression ratio? Around 10.0 respectable for the time. Power output was modest but competitive. Around 140 horsepower at 5,600 RPM. Torque peaked at roughly 150 lb-ft at 4,000 RPM. Nothing crazy, but this engine wasn't about raw power. It was about balance, fuel economy, durability, low emissions, and most importantly, cost. GM needed this engine in everything. Sedans, coupes, wagons, even small SUVs. The platform had to be versatile and cheap to build because millions would be manufactured across multiple plants, powering vehicles from Chevrolet, Pontiac, Saturn, and even Saab. Millions would be built, millions would be sold. And at first, everything seemed fine. The engine was smooth, quiet, easy to manufacture. Mechanics liked the chain-driven cams. No timing belt to replace. Owners appreciated the fuel economy. Reviews were decent. Not spectacular, but acceptable. Cars rolled off assembly lines. Dealerships sold them. Customers drove them home. Normal, ordinary, unremarkable. But then, the first signs of trouble appeared. At around 60,000 to 100,000 miles, engines started coming back. Not one or two, thousands. Same symptoms. Rough idle, loss of power, oil consumption, and in worse cases, complete engine failure. Warranty claims started piling up. Service centers couldn't keep up. GM's internal teams started investigating. But there was a problem. No single cause. That's what made it so difficult. Most people assume engine failures are simple. A bad bearing, a broken piston, a snapped rod. You find the part, you fix it, you move on. Not this one. This engine failed in ways that didn't make sense. Identical vehicles, same year, same mileage, same maintenance schedules. One would run perfectly, the other would need a complete rebuild. Engineers tore down hundreds of failed units looking for patterns. Sometimes they found them, sometimes they didn't, and that's where the nightmare started. One of the earliest issues came from the timing system. On paper, the timing chain should have been bulletproof. Unlike belts, chains don't stretch easily. They don't snap without warning. They're supposed to last the life of the engine. That's what everyone believed. But in the 2.2 Ecotec, the chain tensioner became a weak point. At high mileage, or with poor oil maintenance, the tensioner would lose pressure. The chain would slacken. timing would drift, and at 6,000 RPM, even a slight timing deviation is catastrophic. Valves would kiss pistons, sometimes lightly, sometimes violently, bent valves, damaged guides. In extreme cases, the piston crowns would show clear impact marks, tiny half-moon scars that told the whole story. The timing tensioner relied on oil pressure to maintain proper chain tension. When oil quality degraded or when oil levels dropped even slightly, that pressure would fluctuate. Just a few degrees of timing slip. That's all it took. And suddenly, metal was hitting metal where it should never touch. But here's the strange part. Not every engine had this problem. Some ran perfectly past 200,000 miles, others failed before 80,000. Same design, same parts, same specifications. So what was the difference? That question haunted GM engineers. They ran simulations, stress tests, accelerated aging protocols. In the lab, everything worked. On the street, failures continued. And they weren't done yet. Then came the oil consumption issue. Now, a little oil burn is normal, especially in high-mileage engines. But this was different. Owners reported losing a quart every 1,000 miles, sometimes more. Some were adding oil more often than they changed it. That's not normal. That's a design flaw. Teardowns revealed something disturbing. The piston rings, specifically the oil control rings, were getting clogged with carbon deposits. Once that happened, they couldn't scrape oil off the cylinder walls effectively. Oil would slip past, burn in the combustion chamber, and slowly, the engine would eat itself. Blue smoke from the exhaust became a telltale sign. Park the car for a few hours. Start it up, a cloud of blue-gray smoke. That was oil burning. And once it started, it rarely stopped. Why did it happen? The ring design. The drain-back holes in the pistons were too small. Under high heat, oil would bake into carbon. Those tiny passages would clog. Once clogged, oil had nowhere to go. It stayed trapped, burned, built more carbon. A vicious cycle. The engineers had optimized everything for efficiency. Tighter tolerances, thinner rings, smaller passages, all in the name of reducing friction. Less friction meant better fuel economy, better emissions numbers, but it also meant less margin for error, less room for oil degradation, less forgiveness for extended drain intervals. In a perfect world with perfect oil, changed at perfect intervals, it would have worked beautifully. But the real world isn't perfect, and here's the kicker. Even perfect maintenance didn't always prevent it. You could change your oil religiously, every 3,000 miles. Use the best synthetic, follow every recommendation, and still, it might happen, because the problem wasn't just maintenance, it was also driving conditions. Short trips in cold weather were the worst. The engine never fully warmed up. Condensation mixed with oil. Sludge formed faster. Stop-and-go traffic created heat cycles that accelerated carbon buildup. Highway driving was actually better, sustained heat that burned off deposits. But most drivers did a mix of everything, and that randomness made the problem impossible to predict. So how do you fix a problem that isn't consistent? That was the real challenge. GM tried updates, revised piston designs, slight changes to ring materials. They issued technical service bulletins to dealerships, quiet updates to production engines. A different oil recommendation here, a modified PCV valve there. But the damage was already done. Millions of engines were already on the road. You can't recall them all. You can't rebuild millions of cars. So they did what they could, incremental improvements, running changes, hoping the problems would fade. And then, things got worse. Because oil consumption doesn't just waste oil, it creates heat. And heat is the enemy of everything, especially the timing system. Low oil levels meant reduced lubrication to the timing chain and tensioner, which brought the first problem back, even stronger. Chain wear accelerated, tensioners failed faster, the two problems fed each other. Oil consumption led to low oil levels. Low oil levels caused timing issues. Timing issues caused more stress on the engine. More stress increased oil consumption. A death spiral. Engines that were already struggling spiraled, and once that cycle started, it was nearly impossible to stop. You can probably guess what happened next, but the truth is even worse. Some engines didn't just fail quietly, they failed dramatically, at highway speeds, at 70 miles per hour, in the middle of nowhere. Drivers reported sudden loss of power, loud knocking, then silence, coasting to the shoulder with a dead engine. Inside the engine, it looked like a war zone. Rod bearings wiped out, crank journals scored, metal shavings everywhere. Oil pressure had dropped to near zero. Why? Because once oil consumption got bad enough, owners didn't always keep up. Not everyone checks oil regularly. The oil light comes on, but by then, it's often too late. Modern drivers aren't used to checking oil between changes. They expect engines to just work. Run an engine low on oil, even once, and the damage starts instantly. Bearings run dry, tolerances increase, metal-to-metal contact begins, and at 5,000 RPM, it's over in seconds. The crankshaft spinning thousands of times per minute with no lubrication film. Friction, heat, expansion, seizure. Mechanics began noticing patterns. The bearings looked like they'd been sandblasted. One technician reportedly said, like the oil just disappeared. And in many cases, it had, literally burned away. 1 quart at a time, until there wasn't enough left to protect anything. Owners would come in confused, angry, betrayed. I just had an oil change 2 months ago. Sure, but 3,000 miles ago, when the engine was already burning a quart every 800 miles. The math was brutal. But here's where things get interesting. Despite all these issues, the 2.2 Ecotec never became a complete disaster. Why? Because when it worked really well. There were engines pushing 250,000 miles, some even more. Same design, same specs, completely different outcome. Taxi drivers who maintained them religiously reported excellent reliability. Fleet vehicles with proper service schedules ran for years without issue. So what was the truth? The truth is, this engine lived on a razor's edge. Its design was efficient, lightweight, optimized for fuel economy and emissions, but that also meant tighter tolerances, less margin for error. Small issues became big problems, fast, and that made it unpredictable. For GM, that unpredictability was a nightmare because you can fix a known problem. You can't easily fix a pattern that doesn't behave consistently. You can't tell customers, well, it might last forever or it might fail tomorrow, it depends. That doesn't inspire confidence. So instead of one big recall, they issued service bulletins, updated parts, quiet revisions, but never a full admission, never a public acknowledgement that the design had fundamental issues, because admitting that would mean liability, lawsuits, recalls, billions in costs. So they managed it quietly. And over time, the industry moved on. By the late 2000s, newer Ecotec variants started replacing the early 2.2, direct injection versions, variable valve timing, better piston designs. More power too. Engines like the 2.4-liter LE5 pushed around 170 horsepower. Turbocharged variants went even further, over 260 horsepower in performance trims. The platform evolved, improved. Lessons were learned from the 2.2 struggles. Ring designs improved, oil passages enlarged, tensioner systems upgraded. The later Ecotec engines were genuinely good. Some even became legendary in tuning circles. But the shadow of the early 2.2 never fully disappeared. Ask any experienced mechanic today, and they'll tell you. Some will say it's a solid engine if you maintain it perfectly. Others will warn you to stay away. That kind of split reputation doesn't happen by accident. It happens when an engine is both good and flawed at the same time. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. Because the 2.2 Ecotec wasn't a failure in the traditional sense. It didn't explode on launch. It didn't get pulled from production overnight. It didn't destroy GM's reputation. It just lingered, quietly causing problems for some while running flawlessly for others. A technical paradox, an engineering riddle that never got a clean answer. So what's the real takeaway here? It comes down to one simple idea. Engineering is always a compromise. The 2.2 Ecotec chased efficiency, weight savings, and cost. And it achieved all of them. The fuel economy numbers were impressive. The weight savings helped handling. The cost made vehicles affordable. By those metrics, it was a success. But in doing so, it left less room for imperfection, less tolerance for neglect, less forgiveness. And in the real world, that matters more than anything. Because cars don't live in labs. They live in traffic, in heat, in cold, with missed oil changes, with cheap fuel, with real drivers. Drivers who forget to check oil, who push oil changes to 7,000 miles, who use whatever oil is on sale. Drivers who idle in traffic for hours, who make short trips in freezing weather, who never let the engine fully warm up. The real world is messy, unpredictable, harsh, and that's where the 2.2 Ecotec struggled, not because it was badly designed, but because it was designed too precisely for an imperfect world. It demanded discipline from owners who didn't know they needed to be disciplined. It required attention from drivers who expected maintenance-free operation, and when it didn't get that, it failed. In the end, this engine didn't just power millions of cars, it taught one of the biggest automakers in the world a hard lesson. Sometimes, the hardest problems aren't the ones you can see. They're the ones that show up differently every time. The ones that work in testing but fail in reality. The ones that depend on variables you can't control. And that's exactly why GM could never fully fix it. Because fixing it would have meant redesigning it from scratch, admitting the compromises went too far, starting over. And by the time they realized that, millions were already out there. So they improved what they could, learned what they needed to, and moved forward. The 2.2 Ecotec became a chapter in GM's history, not their proudest, but maybe their most instructive. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of GM's most misunderstood engines, let me know what you want to see next. Another hidden failure, a legendary comeback, or a forgotten piece of automotive history. And if you like stories where engineering meets real-world chaos, make sure you stick around. Because the truth is always more complicated than it seems.